My name is Alain Laframboise. I'm here with John Foster. We work on the developer experience team. So if you've been to ArcGIS for Developers, then you've seen the work that we've done. So a couple things just logistically. We're going to talk about essential ArcGIS tools, tips, and tricks for everyone. And if you want to follow along with the slides, you can go to slides.com, Laframboise, and all of my slide decks are there for the entire summit. So if you want to grab a snapshot of that or just follow along, all the links are there and everything, so you have all the resources, okay? So, logistics aside, ArcGIS platform is more than just a platform. It's a set of tools, as we should know, and there's tools that you can use and leverage as a developer to get the job done. Ourselves, like yourselves, are sometimes under a lot of pressure to get an application built very quickly. So we're here to show you some tips and tricks on how to do that, hopefully some productivity tools. Everything from using the website to managing data, to managing services. These are all tasks that we're tasked with as developers. Even though we're developers, we're asked to do everything, including design maps now. So we're going to show you tools on how to do that, and these are some of them. And the last part is the ArcGIS platform is built on standards. And we're going to take a look at how we could use some of those standards to help us build applications quickly. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into the ArcGIS for Developers website, because that should be the most obvious tool for everybody, right? We're familiar with it, hopefully. And there's all kinds of good things on there. There's information about licensing and APIs. There's a search tool that nobody uses that we're going to show you how to use today. There's a whole section on getting started if you're a new developer and you're new to the platform. Just a show of hands, how many people are new to ArcGIS? Don't be shy. And then everybody else, put up their hand if you're a pro. Okay, and everybody else is somewhere in the middle. So we have tutorials, we have open source apps, as you saw in the plenary as well. There's some ideas you can get from feature pages that we're going to take a look at, success stories, what other folks are doing, and then of course how to get support and help. So I'm going to pass it over to my friend John, and he's going to show us ArcGIS for Developers and some things that are important.
Hey everybody, how you doing? So I'm going to show you some stuff with the website, walk through that, and hopefully you'll find some tips and tricks that'll help you out with your development efforts. So ArcGIS for Developers, consider this your gateway to your development with ArcGIS. We have a very, very broad platform with lots of different SDKs, services, lots of features, APIs, and all kinds of things that you can use in your development efforts. And this website is your gateway to all of that. So, take the time and explore what we have done out here, and hopefully that's going to help your development effort. One thing I want to draw your attention to is our success stories. This is something that's more inspirational. This is some ideas that you can get about how others are using ArcGIS in their solutions, and that might inspire you to do things in your solutions. So check these out and see what our customers are doing and how they're using ArcGIS. For example, in plenary this morning, you saw us talk about this Alaska story map. This is using our story maps tool, which presents maps in a story format. And the story map software itself is open source, and you're welcome to go to GitHub and get that, and you can use that in your own applications. And then it uses the Python API to aggregate data and develop layers that could be used in this community utility. So check that out, and you can see how they implemented that, and look at that on our success stories. Another success story I want to draw some attention to really quick is under the government. We have this Queensland Globe. This is an application that was developed by Queensland in Australia, and this aggregates all of their open data layers into a single map that their constituents can see and use for their own purposes in their community. And it aggregates all of that data. So this is using our JavaScript API, and they build their own widgets and customize a lot of this map. And this map is also available for you to check out. So they actually put in a live link to this app, and you can see this app running in real time. And you can see they have a search tool, they have a layer selection tool, place finder, and all kinds of things, and you can select multiple base maps. And we're going to show you throughout this talk today how to do a lot of these things yourselves. So if you haven't figured out how to do any of those things with ArcGIS, then you're in the right place. We're going to teach you a lot of that today. Another area of the website I'd like to draw your attention to is what we call our capabilities section, or our features. These are demos where we're going to describe how a lot of our most in-demand features of the platform are used. And we give you live demos done with our JavaScript API, and you can actually play around with these things and see how they work. So for example, we have data visualization. You can visualize data on top of maps. We have maps and layers. You can see how maps and layers are used in different mapping scenarios. Geocoding, directions, spatial analytics. So with spatial analysis, you can look to see how our geometry engine works, and you could use that and see how that might be something that you could use inside your applications. And then I'd like to turn your attention to our geocoding capabilities. So for example, not everybody knows we have place search. We have the ability to search for places on the map, and our geocoder can return places nearby in given categories. So for example, if I want to look for restaurants in the city of New York, well, there's going to be a lot of those, but as I click around the map, it'll return those features. So now you may say, oh, that's really cool. How do I do that? So most of our demos have links to a tutorial that demonstrates the code on how we actually built that and what parts of the platform we leverage to do it. So in this particular example, here's a tutorial for Find Places. So if I can go into that tutorial, it'll explain how that demo actually works. All of our tutorials follow a consistent format. First, we give you a clear objective, what you plan to accomplish in this tutorial. We give you just a brief set of steps on how we're going to accomplish this, and we highlight the features of the platform and the APIs that we'll use to do that. For the JavaScript specifically, there's actually a live working application in the browser that you could play around with. And then we give you the steps to do this. And the steps are very copy and paste friendly. So you can just copy this code as you follow along on the steps, paste them into your IDE or whatever your app development environment is, and then you'll get the working application. And then in some of the steps, if we have to describe a little bit more of what has to happen in that step than the actual, what we can talk about with the code, we have these information disclosures that give you a little bit more detail. If you're unfamiliar with the platform or you want to find out a little bit more information about something, we couldn't describe it very clearly. At the end of each lab, there's a link to the solution. So if you read the lab and you just want to cut right to the chase, you can get the solution right away. We have full solutions for all of the tutorials that we have. And then we challenge you, and we give you a little extra step. And we're like, hey, take this one step further, see what else you can do with this. And then there's always a logical next lab that you can do. So if you want to learn more, there's a next step, and we have a set of related labs to other features of the platform and other APIs that may be related to this lab to help you continue on your journey and learn more about our platform. The labs are also done in a variety of different SDKs. So no matter what you're developing in, we've got a tutorial for you. You could also use these to compare code. Maybe you're migrating code from JavaScript to Python, and you might want to see, well, what does that look like in Python? You can click on that and see the same tutorial done with the Python API. So there's a lot of information there, and hopefully there's some tips and tricks to help you in your development efforts. So another thing I want to bring to your attention is the documentation page. This is a very comprehensive documentation page, and our platform covers a lot of different capabilities, and we've got a lot of different SDKs and APIs and tools and technology that are at your disposal, but a lot of that stuff is very hard to discover. So we try to do in a narrative format, talk about the core concepts, such as like all the different data types of the platform, maybe security and authentication, stuff that Al and I are going to cover a little bit later today in this discussion. There's links to all the different SDKs that we have available for you. And then also in some of the stuff that we talked about in plenary this morning, the SOEs and the SOIs, the enterprise SDKs, the Pro SDK, all of those other tools that you might need access to are all accessible from this particular place. And then at the bottom of the page, we have other links to other platform technology, like web map specification, web scene specification, other things that you've heard about us talk about on the platform that may be very important for you to understand how those things work under the covers. So another thing I'd like to bring your attention to, another very hard to find thing, is our arcade documentation. So we have all of our arcade documentation available here if you want to use arcade for definition expressions or custom renderers in your maps. You want to learn more about the APIs, we have access to that. And then also there's an arcade playground. So you can play around with the arcade APIs in the browser format and test them out before you actually integrate them into your code and try to get them working with your application. So that's another little tip and trick that not many people know about. So going back to the website, Al brought up earlier is our search capability. So when you search on the website for any high-level feature, all right, we search the entire website. So in this particular instance, I'll search for buffer, and it searches across the entire platform. And it returns all of our APIs and SDKs, but that may not be what you're really looking for. Maybe you're only interested in the JavaScript API. So we have a search scoping mechanism here that you could scope the search, particularly to one SDK or one API that you're interested in. So you could do that from any high-level page, but if you're actually in one of our SDKs and then you perform a search, all right, it's going to be automatically scoped to that particular SDK. So that's a little shortcut or a little trick that you can use to help optimize your search experience. Finally, I'd just like to call your attention to our support page. So we've got a support capability where we talk about a lot of our community resources and a lot of the other places you can go to get help if you can't find help on our website. And then each one of our SDKs has a dedicated support page where you can find access to resources specific to that API. And so those things will be available to you if you're only interested in that. They give you shortcuts to help you with that. And then also, we've got some of our developers, and you can get a direct line to some of the people that work on these things. So remember all of those things, and hopefully you'll be able to develop faster and better with our APIs. All right, Al, back to you. Thank you.
So if you've just always clicked past ArcGIS for developers, hopefully we've opened your eyes a little bit. There are some tools, there are some resources, there are some other people's apps you can look at, and obviously the dev labs are really important too. And you're going to see the dev labs getting integrated directly into the APIs in this next release coming up. So they're going to be an integrated part. So again, it's a real fast and handy way to grab code and get things done. So I want to talk a little bit about accounts in your dashboard. It's probably another overlooked, very handy tool. So the thing that's important is that there are a couple different accounts out there. So there's public accounts that you can get that really aren't designed for development. You can get these at free seminars and so forth that Esri provides. But more importantly, most people either have an online account or a developer subscription. So the difference is basically your developer subscription is for you to do development on, obviously. But if you have an online account, you still have access to the developer site. You can still access the tools that you need and so forth, such as the vector tile style editor, such as the ability to load layers and import layers. Something you may not have known is that the developer subscription, there's really two plans associated with it. We changed our pricing model and some of the plan program just recently, but what's important to know is the essentials is for your free development, obviously building out your applications and working with them. You get credits per month and so forth, and that's for one developer. What a lot of people don't know is that the builder plan gives you two organizations. And the reason for that is because we know it's important to have a developer org as well as a deployment org. Okay, so a lot of people miss that and overlook that, but it's really important when it comes time to testing your deployments. So basically it's 2 orgs, you have 1 dev and 5 user accounts. So you can really spread that out and do some real world testing before you deploy to the field. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to John. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the accounts and the dashboard tools.
All right, thanks, Al. All right, so on the dashboard, Al brought up the different account types. For demo purposes, I just wanted to show you really quick. If you do log in with a public account, this is what you'll see, and it's kind of a crippled dashboard, so a lot of the things are not actually available. with the public account, you can download our SDKs. So you do get access to our developer technology, but you don't get any writable opportunities here. You cannot create layers, you cannot import data, you cannot create applications. So it's not actually a good development account to use. And in fact, you'll see that if you are logged in with a public account, we're going to ask you to upgrade your account to a developer account. Public accounts cannot upgrade, so you must create a free developer account in order to use that. The next thing I'd like to point out is if you do log in with the ArcGIS Online account, a lot of you probably have ArcGIS Online accounts, you can use this for development. So if you have a creator account or higher, you do get access to creating layers, importing data. You can use the Basemaps style editor and save your custom basemaps. You can create applications, and you can certainly deploy applications. All right, if you're using our technology, as long as your credits are accounted for under this scenario, and you're developing, if you're developing for runtime, you could release under the light license plan, you can use your ArcGIS Online account. One thing you'll notice though, is that all of your credits are accounted to your organization. So this may or may not be what you really want to do, and you might want a separate developer account in order to track your credits. So in order to do that, you want to log in with a developer account. Our developer account is free. All you need is an email address, and you can sign up for it. You don't have to put a credit card down or anything. You could sign up for it very quickly and easily, and this is a good way to do the development. So you get access to all of our development tools. Everything is available for you. You get access to a runtime license key, so you can develop and deploy runtime on the light level. And now you can see I actually get access to my credit usage in my applications, and I can monitor that and see how things are doing. And you can see under my 50 credit plan, I'm actually using some credits, but I'm well under the 50 credits a month here, and I'm doing a lot of things. I've got feature layers and storage, I've been doing geocoding and routing, so I got a lot of things for my money here. One thing you can do with your dashboard is you can customize it for your type of development. In my particular case, I'm an iOS developer. I've optimized my dashboard for iOS development. What does that do? That gives me tutorials and quick starts that I can use directly from my SDK. It gives me recent news that's related to my particular SDK, and then it tells me when the latest release is and how to download my SDK. So you can optimize this for as many SDKs as you like, but we only have so much room to show you here, so it would be, prioritize all your SDKs in that area. So here you get access to your apps and your layers, and later in today's demonstration, we're going to show you a lot of these things and how to work with these things. If you style basemaps and use our vector tile style editor, your custom basemaps would appear here, and you can get to the quick editor from there. So that's pretty much it. All right, Al, back to you.
Okay, so that's cool. So use your dashboard. I know a lot of devs don't use it, and you're going to find a whole bunch of tools that are hidden in there, and I'm going to show you a couple now. One of the first is just the ability to switch between accounts. So as I mentioned, as you're doing dev, obviously it's nice to have a deployment scenario and a deployment account all set up. So what you can do is when you go to log in, there's a switch accounts menu right here. So I'm going to switch to my other account. But before I do that, I actually need to link them up. So I'm going to link up my deployment account, and it's called Al Dev Labs. I'm just going to log in there. So now I've linked these two up, so I can click on my second account, and it's going to bring me back to the dashboard. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see that. Oh, hang on a sec. Let me try that again. Switch accounts. Pick my Dev Labs. And it's asking me to log in, which I'll do. Okay, now we're logged in as Al Dev Labs, which is my deploy account. And you can see there's basically nothing in here. It's just an empty account, and it's ready for me to do any of the testing that I need to do. If I need to move apps over, layers, web maps, whatever it is. So that's a quick and easy tip for sure. Let me go back. The next logical thing to talk about is how do you move content from one account to the other? So something that I come across all the time. So one way to do it is if you have something simple like a web map, then you can open up that web map and you have the option, if you're logged in, to save and save as. And you can save it out to your account if you're accessing somebody else's that's public. Okay, so that's one method. But realistically, back up here a little bit. Realistically, what we're going to want to do is actually move chunks of data over at one time. So there's a tool called AGO Assistant, and if you're not familiar with it, then hopefully you'll find value in it, and you can find it on our GitHub org for Esri. So I'm just going to load up this tool. See some people are taking some snapshots, and I use this tool all the time. It's super handy. So right now I'm logged in with my AlDev account, so this is where I'm doing my core dev. And what I'm going to do is I want to copy content, so I'm going to log into another account. It happens to be another online account. So I'm going to change my username here to DevLabs, which is my deploy account. Now I can go to the root of my dev account, I can grab items and move them over. So when I do that, this is interesting. It actually asks me, do I want to do like a high-level clone or a deep clone? I can actually move a reference to the feature service over, so I can still own the data in my dev account, or I can actually grab the entire data and build a new service. So I'm going to say do a full copy. So now it's copying that over. While it's doing that, I'm going to grab a web map too. And it's showing me that it's updating the definition. It's going to take a couple seconds, and then the copy was okay. So now this data actually lives in the other account as its own service. So if it's an editing app or something like that, all the edits will occur over there. So it's just a nice way to kind of move things over. It's a drag drop environment. I use this tool all the time. I wanted to make sure that you guys knew it was available. Okay, so that's moving data between accounts. Now we're going to talk about authenticated services. This is another tip and trick that a lot of people don't know about. So the services obviously require authentication to access, a lot of them anyways, like directions and finding drive time, distances, and so forth. What you can do is you can actually create an app, create a service proxy, and basically use the credentials from your account to authenticate and allow applications to use that without prompting the user for authentication. Okay? So I'm going to pass it over to John now, and he's going to show us how to set up this within the desktop and the dashboard framework.
Exactly. All right, so what I'm going to show you right now is going to be done with the JavaScript API. It can be done with any of the runtimes as well, but in order to demonstrate this in a browser, we'll do it with JavaScript. So I'm on the home page, and I'll start from here, and I'll go to Get Started with JavaScript. And in here, we have a tutorial called Access Services with OAuth 2. So OAuth 2 is the authentication type that we're going to use to authenticate with ArcGIS Online. We're going to use that as the authority for our credentials and our accounts. And then we're going to pass that information back to our application so that our application can know that this is an authentic user and they're allowed to access this particular service or feature, or if you're accessing private layers or private data. So we're going to do it that way. All right, so all of these steps are in this dev lab. So if you want to follow along, you can go to the browser and try the dev lab. It's a little bit tricky because it's using authentication and calling a second service, ArcGIS Online. So you can't actually do this in CodePen or in the sandbox. So we're going to do this on a separate web server that I'm running locally. All right, so first set of steps are we need to set up an application. We need to go into our dashboard and we need to define an application. An application is going to act as the authentication for our application with ArcGIS Online. So there's a set of steps here. Go to the dashboard, set up a new application. It says give it some tags, and we'll do all of that. So I'm going to go to my dashboard that I showed you earlier. If you already have an application, you can certainly use it, but you would create a new application if you did not have one. I have an application defined for this purpose. Once you define a new application, you'll get this interface with a set of tabs. The very first tab is called Authentication. So we're going to go to the Authentication tab, and in this tab, ArcGIS Online will automatically assign my application client ID. This is a unique identifier to identify this from all the other applications that are running on ArcGIS Online. It has a client secret. This is like a password to use in order to gain access to this particular service. And a temporary token if I want to use REST API or some other APIs for temporary testing. But this is not really for production. This is really for development. So I just wanted to point that out. Another very important piece of information that you'll need is you need a redirect URL. What happens is that when you authenticate, your client is going to ask ArcGIS Online to authenticate a user on your behalf. ArcGIS Online has to call back to your application with the token of authentication for that user. That has to be a whitelisted URL, because you could have a man in the middle attacking your services or some other unknown rogue hacker in there. So ArcGIS Online only wants to talk back to services that you've defined. So here I'm running on my local server. I have a host defined, local host, and my app will be running in demo. So I set that up. You can set up as many redirect URLs as you want. ArcGIS Online just wants to make sure it's only calling back to whitelisted URLs that you have defined for your application. All right, so now that I have that information, I can start coding my application. So it's a JavaScript application. There's going to be some HTML, and there's going to be some CSS, and I'm using Visual Studio Code here, and I have all of that HTML, and I have all that CSS all defined here, and then I've got a separate JavaScript file. Now this is going to be the exact code that's in that lab. I just structured it a little bit differently to be a little bit more optimized for demonstration purposes today, and so I don't have to type so much, and you guys don't want to watch me type. All right, so we need the client ID. We're going to put the client ID into JavaScript when it loads up its authentication manager or the identity manager. It needs the client ID to identify our application. Okay, and then we need the traffic URL to where there's a traffic service. All right, and the traffic service is a premium service. I would not be able to access the traffic service without logging in and identifying myself. Okay, and that's all explained in this lab. And the traffic URL is defined. Oh, it's in here somewhere. Okay, there's the client ID. Oh, and the traffic URL, it just didn't scroll. Okay, and it's there. So that code is all set up here, and that's really all we need. So I'm going to save that. The only other difference that I made in this lab is that I made the point of interest Palm Springs, so we can see what the traffic looks like in Palm Springs, where we are right now. So now when I load this app, it's going to load the map, and we're not going to see a traffic layer because I haven't logged in yet. So I need to log in. It's going to run the login. Now ArcGIS Online is smart enough to know that I've already logged in because I'm going to the arcgis.com domain. I've already logged in. So now it's just asking me to approve my account and make sure I can use that. So I'm going to say approve. Now it's going to reload the app. The identity manager is going to recognize that we're actually signed in. It's now going to access that traffic layer, which is a premium layer, with my token, and it's going to say, okay, this user has access to it, and we're going to allow it. Now you see the traffic layer on top of my map. Okay, I could sign out and forget the cookie and lose that. So now Al brought up about proxy. So what if I don't want my user to log in? What if I just want them to not have a login experience, and I'll take care of the authentication and use the credits on my account? Well, that's what the proxy is all about. You can use the proxy to do that. So let's demonstrate how you set up the proxy. Going back to my dashboard and back to my application, I'll just do that really quick. Dashboard, back to my application. Next to the authentication tab is a services tab. In the services tab, you can define your own proxies. These proxies would then be accounted to your account. And we have a number of different proxies that you can use. A lot of the services that are available on ArcGIS Online can be proxied. So you could proxy geocoding, and you could proxy some analytics server and our demographics layer. So I set up a traffic layer proxy. I proxied that particular traffic layer, which is right there. And then when you set up a proxy, you can define a rate limit. So just in case you want to make sure that you have a handle on the number of users that are accessing your proxy, because some of these will burn credits on your behalf. So it takes care of that. And again, just like with the other authentication with the OAuth, you need to make sure that you whitelist who has access to your proxy, so that not just anybody's using your proxy on your behalf and rendering traffic layers on top of their maps without your knowledge. So only known referrers are allowed to access your proxy. All right, so now we're going to set all of that up. So I need to copy this proxy URL that ArcGIS Online automatically made for me. And now I'm going to use the proxy URL in my application. And now I'm going to have my application use the proxy service instead of the sign-on service. So now the logic is hide the login information and just show the proxy, just show the traffic layer. You see, there's no login. There's no authentication manager check to see if somebody's logged in. We're just going to load that traffic layer right up, and hopefully that'll work. So now I'm going to reload this app. You'll see there's no login interface now. The map will render and the traffic layer will render. In fact, the traffic layer rendered faster than the map. And there you have it. So now the proxy is taking care of that. And that's it. Back to you, Al.
Okay, great. So again, it's just something that's built into your dashboard tools, right? As a developer, it's one of the tools hopefully that you're using so you can obfuscate the authentication. Now, another thing you may come across are authenticated layers within the system. So we have premium layers that you can access. And it's interesting because they actually don't use credits, but they require authentication to get to them. So if you can't use the service proxy method, then I'm going to show you another way that you can authenticate these layers so you can just pull them into your app and use them. So the first thing we're going to do is going to go to the map viewer. And inside of this web map, I've got the tapestry segmentation. So the first thing to do is just to copy this layer out. And when I copy it, I'm going to actually save this layer to my account as a copy. So this item's being saved into my ArcGIS or my developer account right now. And what I want to do is go and take a look at it. So I'll go to the item details. And I have essentially an entire copy of that. So you can see all the content here. But what's important is for me to go down here and copy the URL, which is really the pointer to the data itself. So I'm going to go up to content now. And I'm going to create an authenticated connection to this data. So I'm going to paste in that URL to that REST endpoint. And I'm going to put in my credentials. These are my dev credentials. And I'm going to ask this item to store the credentials with the service. All right, so that's what's performing the authentication. I'm going to give this a name so I remember it. This is my my auth layer, so it's already been authenticated. And I'm going to add this item to my account. So this is the trick. The reason we're showing you this is because it creates a copy of the demographic layer, but you lost all the cartography. So the cartography has been set up at many different levels and layers to match all of the demographics. So what I'm going to do is going to go down here and copy the URL. And I'm going to go back to the original layer that I created, which is my copy. And a lot of people don't know you can do this, but you can go to settings, go down here, I'm going to select all, and I'm going to paste. So I basically put another item's endpoint in here that's already been authenticated. So now the benefit is I have the cartography in an authenticated endpoint. And you can do this with any of our Premier layers and Premier services. The last part here is just I'm going to click on these guys. I'm going to share both of them out because they're both basically using one another at this point in time. And if I go to the copied layer, Let me just go to, let's see here, settings. Sorry, let me back up. Okay, so I want to get back to the overview. That's just what I want. Okay, perfect. And I need to copy this item ID. And I'm going to go to the developer site and we'll zip down to some of the labs, and we're going to use this add a layer from an item. I'm just going to spin up the solution here. And if you're not using these labs, you should really give them a shot because there's a lot of really good code. So I'm just going to paste in that item ID, and I'm just going to run it in this application. We'll give it a full refresh here. Let me paste it in one more time. So what I'm doing is I'm overriding the polygon layer that's in there with the layer that I just created. So we'll give it a second to render. There it is. So now that layer that usually requires authentication, or requires the user to be logged in, was able to render itself in an application running on CodePen, which proves that there's nobody logged in right now except for me from my personal account to CodePen, which isn't my ArcGIS account. So this is how you basically get around authenticating layers, not services. Okay? So that's hopefully a cool tip and trick for you guys to think about. What I want to talk about now is a few different ways to load web maps. So when we have a web map, basically we have this endpoint that we access, and really what this thing is just a JSON structure, right? And we can access it in different ways. So right now the map viewer is accessing it, but I can use a share URL. So basically this is arcgis.com, sharing REST, content, items, and so forth. So the link is in here for you guys. And all you do is you just paste in the item ID that you want, and we'll dump back the JSON for this. So as a developer, I can come in here and I can grab this JSON, just copy that, and I can throw this in an application. So here I just have like a little web map from JSON CodePen app. And right now, on this side here, I'll just make it a little bigger, I'm just loading in that item ID, so I'm getting the same web map. But what a lot of people don't know is you could actually grab the JSON, just like I did earlier, and I have this little get JSON function, and then there are static methods on a lot of the classes in JavaScript, and the runtime for that matter, where you can just do from JSON. So basically I've just dumped in here the JSON from that web map, and what it does, let me just run it. What it's doing now is it's actually creating the web map without doing a round trip to the server. So it's one whole less HTTP round trip. So as long as you're not using authenticated web maps, then this will work just fine. And it's really cool because you can deliver your applications with the JSON right inside. The web map is essentially in your app. Isn't that cool? All right, so that's something I wanted to show you. It's a technique that I use quite a bit. We use them when we build the app templates as well for ArcGIS Online. All right, and then working with layers. So there's some things you can do in the dashboard that you may not be aware of. And if you're a developer, at times we need to populate data sets and build data sets very quickly. Okay, so I go to the dashboard and I can create new layer. Now there's two options here. You can drag and drop a CSV or a GeoJSON file in here, but this is what I actually do quite a bit, is just create these empty layers, especially if you're building like a crowdsourced data set or something like that. So let's just add some tags. This is going to be a point geometry set. I'm just going to call this label. This is a field, so I'm actually defining the schema for this, right? So I didn't need to create a shape file first and then bring it in. I'm just defining it on the fly. And I'm going to call this population and just make it an integer. So I've added two fields to this new data set that's just about to transpire. I'm going to share this with everyone and then create the layer. So this has been here for a while, so some of you might be familiar with it, but I bet you're not familiar with this. So if you go to the Data tab, you can actually start adding data to this right inside your developer framework, right inside the dashboard. So I'm going to call this just North America, and I'm just going to give it a value for population. So there's 1 point. I'm going to add another point, and if this was a line data set, then I could digitize a new line in here as well, and I'll just give it a different value. So I've added a couple points, and I can actually visualize this data right inside my dashboard and my developer experience. Okay? Now, if I'm building like crowdsourced applications and stuff like that, where you're going to be testing out in the field, and you got to create a lot of these dummy data sets, and this is a really handy way to do it. Okay, another trick I wanted to show you, something that I use a lot. There are times when we have to build applications in a very uncomfortable amount of time. So a lot of times I will go out and use the tools at my disposal. As an example, I'll go out to the map viewer and I will style this map that's showing population with visual variables, right? So I'm just gonna go through the UI and I'm gonna build this thing. And the next step is maybe to take a look at the code itself. Like I was showing you, the GeoJSON can be accessed with the secret URL that you can access through my slides. And if I scroll down, I can find a renderer property, and those are the visual variables that were set when I went through the UI. And then underneath that, I have a class breaks renderer. This is like all of the JSON that's defining this thing. So I could go to the JavaScript docs and I can figure out how to manipulate the objects and create this, or I can just copy this renderer from top to bottom right here, just before the pop-up. I can copy that out and I can go to an application and paste it in and hydrate my objects just like I showed you before. So what you're seeing is the default renderer for that feature layer. So that's basically what you get when you just paste in that URL and make this a little bigger. So there it is. And what I have is the GeoJSON that I've pasted in here from the class breaks renderer, the visual variables. And then I also grabbed the pop-up information as well, because I styled the pop-up when I was there. So it's a lot easier to use the map viewer to do that, and then go back and just steal the JSON, uncomment these lines of code. Let me run it again. And now I have a formatted pop-up and all of the styling and visualization variables that were set from the map viewer. Okay, so it's a technique that I use all the time. I wanted to share it with you guys. For me, it helps me out exponentially, just to make life a little simpler. Okay, another thing, you guys, if you're building an enterprise application, there are times when you don't necessarily want to use another API, like one of the runtime APIs or Python as an example. You just want to access the data, the raw data that we provide and the raw services that we provide. And you can do that through the ArcGIS REST API. So I'm going to pass it over to John, who's going to quickly show us how to assemble a REST app. So if you're building an enterprise application, you generate a token and do a few things. And we've got a bunch of dev labs to step you through it. So I'll pass it over to John. He'll give you a quick demo.
All right.
And then we'll
run through this really quickly. So the first thing I want to point out is that all of the REST API documentation is on the developer's website. So check that out. That's right off the homepage. And you go to REST. And all of the APIs that we're going to show you are all documented in detail. And it's a little deep. And hopefully you can do a lot of reading on that and learn how to do this. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go back to the dev labs, start building your app, and we're going to go to the REST API at this point. And first thing that you need to do is you need to get an access token. Most of the REST APIs require an access token in order to use them, since this is a lower level API that you're basically hitting our services directly. And you're not really going through any of our SDKs and any of the steps that we put in front of it to make all this stuff a little bit easier. So this is the raw access. So the steps are somewhat the same. We need to go to the dashboard, define an application, we're going to use that client ID again. This time we're going to use the client secret. And we need to use that in order to get the token in order to call the REST API. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to use a tool called Postman in order to do this. Okay, so Postman is a REST tool that you can use. This is open source. You can download this application. It's available for anybody to use. So I'm going to define a new post operation, okay, with the URL to get the token. All of this that I'm talking about, it's all in the dev lab, so I'm not doing anything magical here. It's all described over there. I just don't want to go through everything and just for the sake of time. We need the client ID that we already showed you on the JavaScript lab. This time I need the client secret that I got from my developer control panel. So there was the client secret that I got from the app definition. And then I need a grant type for client credentials. This tells the server that this is a credential request, and we're going to use the client ID, client secret, as opposed to logging in a user, for example. And then with these tokens, you could specify an expiration time. So for the use of this lab, we're going to make it a little bit larger than normal. Okay, and we can set that. Now I can send that to the server. The server responds, my credentials check out, and I get an access token. So you see it responded with a token, and it also responded to tell me when this token will expire. Because after it expires, it'll ask me to get another token. So now I can use that token. But one little trick I wanted to show you is that you could use this in something, for example, you could use this in a shell script, like Bash or PowerShell or something like that. So I could make that exact same request using curl, and in one of my batch scripts I could do this and get the token. Now I can use the REST API in an enterprise application or some other service that I'm wiring up in the background or as part of my development efforts, and not using an SDK, and get something really quick and dirty. All right, so let's go back to Postman. Now I want to use the REST API to do the find places. This is the exact same find places application that we did using the geocoding service that I showed you earlier with JavaScript. So in order to do that, because we're running out of time here, I'm not going to go over it. I showed you where to get the API documentation. The only other trick is I'm going to use the location for Palm Springs. I'm going to set what fields that I'm going to get back from the geocoder. I just want the address and the place name. And then the number of locations I'm going to request from the service, I'm going to set to 25. All right, and then I'm going to run that. All right, it failed. So what happened was that the token that I was using has expired. It hasn't worked. So what I need to do is run here, get my token, copy and paste the token into my find places, replace this old token with the new token. Oops. And now it worked. And you saw how fast that was. That went to ArcGIS Online and back and gave me the 25 nearest places to eat in this basic vicinity. So you can see here, these are real places right here in Palm Springs. So I'm sure we're all getting hungry. So let's go to dinner. Back to you, Al.
All right. So we wanted to show you how easy it is to access. You know, there are just times when you can't use a particular API and nothing is available and you just need to talk to a service, and now you know how to do it. Okay, the last part we want to talk about is the vector tile style editor. So this is another tool that you get when you log in as a developer and you go to your dashboard. So I'm going to head to the dashboard. You saw this morning on the main stage as well. So we can create a new Basemap style. So I won't go through too many details here, but I'll show you how to quickly style a map so that you guys can look like rock stars in just a few seconds. If you want, and you're not sure of a color scheme, you can just pick the random color scheme and it will go through and generate different colors for you. Otherwise, you can go and pick a theme that you're interested in. I'll start with like something from yellow, and you can pick like either a monochrome theme or triadic and so forth. So I have a design session tomorrow. I'm going to talk a lot about this and how it was designed. So if you're interested, come on by. So our land, we'll make a little bit more green, and our water, we'll set that to more of a blue shade. And let's see, what else? Maybe the nature, we'll make it green as well. Just kind of style this up. And let's say this is the application this is the base map that we want to use in the application. Maybe we've matched this to the brand of an organization that we're building an app for, and so forth. Okay, so that's the first part. The next part is we can save this as, so I'm just going to use the default name. I'm going to share it out. And there it is. And then I'm going to grab this ID here, and I'm going to go back to the developer site, and once again, going to look for a dev lab to help me out here. So styling and visualization. Let's see here, display a styled vector base map. And there's kind of a special way to do this. So I'm going to grab the live solution in CodePen. And I'm going to change the portal item to the one that I just created. Make sure I have that. Paste that in. And I'm going to run it again. And now I should have my vector tiled base map in there. So that's how easy it is. It just takes a few minutes to style an entire base map using the editor. I mean, this is just incredible technology. Again, I'm here to give you tips and tricks to look like rock stars, go back to your boss and be able to crank things out really fast. So without further ado, I mean, that's really it. So we wanted to talk about accounts, how to do some data management and moving and switching. We looked at authentication, a few tools along the way. We looked at how to use the JSON and kind of dig into the JSON to populate your apps very quickly. Then we finished with REST and the styling. So you can find all the slides here in slides.com, Framboise. Don't forget to please take the survey, and I think we have a few minutes left for questions if anybody has questions. Thank you very much.
When you say an item with credentials embedded, does the token ever expire, or does it just be created in token?
That's a good question. So the question was, when does the token expire if you create the authenticated layer like I did through the UI? And yes, it will refresh, and you can control when the refresh and how long that token lives. So you'll be given a new token every time that layer is accessed. And what I didn't get into was another drop-down that said, how many requests are you going to allow per minute or per second? And beneath that was, when does the token expire? So you control when the token expires. You'll get a fresh token upon access. Good question. One more time, please. The portal ID is a unique ID, that's correct. Yeah, okay, so I think the question is, can I basically come up with my own portal ID? You can't do that. You have to let the system generate the portal ID. What you can do is you can rename the item anything you want. You can give the layer any name, but you have to use the portal ID that's assigned. It's almost like, remember back in the COM days when you got a GUID? Okay, a unique ID. It's at that level of uniqueness that's generated by the system. Say that again?
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Okay. In my organization, I have 100 users. So each one create their own unique feature class. So next time when they log in back to the app, they want to see their own feature layer, not all the layers. So that time we need to map the username with the feature layer, right?
So there's a mapping between the username and the feature layer?
Yes, exactly.
And you want to make that consistent?
Yes.
Okay, come on up here and you'll have to tell me more about your app design and I can help you out. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah. All right, is there anyone else? Yes.
Reading the layers, where does that stuff store? Does it sort in ArcGIS?
Yeah, so the question is, when I was creating the authenticated layer, where does that live? I was logged in that case, with a developer account, but if you're in your org account, then it will be in your org, in your content.
So they are two different
So that's a separate question, and that is, yes, the developer account and your org account are two separate accounts, yes. A lot of people will use their org accounts for development, which John was saying is totally allowed. It's perfectly fine. But we're just telling you that there are two options. There are some developers that don't have a notion or don't have a need for an organization. They just need access to the system. And in that case, yes. But in both cases, it doesn't matter what you're logged into. When you create an item, it will go into your content, into your account, whatever you're logged in with. Okay, we'll take that offline for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, you need like the link accounts that Al showed earlier to do that, because you do have two separate accounts. So that's why.
Okay, any other questions? All right, guys, have a great conference, and hope to
thank
see you
you.
at some of the other sessions.